We are going to bring you now live. There is quite a dramatic scene unfolding in downtown Halifax this morning. Members and supporters of the film and television industry are getting set to hold a large protest against budget cuts to the film tax credit announced by the McNeil government last week. Today's rally is part of an aggressive lobby campaign to reverse the changes. Now, Global's Marieke Walsh is live at Province House this morning, where crews are busy getting ready, and she's joined now by the leader of the Progressive Conservatives in Nova Scotia, Jamie Baillie. So good morning, Marieke.
Good morning, Crystal. Well, as you said, Jamie Baillie is standing by. I'm just quickly going to give you a setup of what we're seeing behind us. So about a dozen crew have been working since 1 a.m. this morning to set up a stage and 2 jumbotrons for today's protest. Organizers say they are expecting between 1,000 and 4,000 protesters to show up here at Province House, not only take over Granville, but also the streets surrounding Province House. And they say they are protesting the film tax credit. So as you mentioned, Jamie Baillie is standing by, and we're going to go to him now. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Morning.
So you have been critical of the government's changes on the film tax credit. Why is that?
Well, the government knows the cost, but what they ignored was the benefit of having the jobs here, young, talented Nova Scotians, the very people that we want to encourage, actually, and have more of. So they missed the value of what this means to Nova Scotia. This is actually the economy of the future that we all want to build, and so we should be finding ways to encourage it and not cut it.
And so then what do you make of the government's argument that it just doesn't make economic sense to be paying this much money from taxpayer dollars for this industry?
Well, they only looked at the cost side of the equation. And what Nova Scotians need, if we're going to actually grow and build a modern, dynamic economy here that lasts, is these kinds of jobs. This isn't about a budget formula, really. It's about jobs for young, creative, talented Nova Scotians and the value that they bring to our economy. And everyone knows that the value that is added, $150 million in economic activity, is far greater than the cost, and that's why we should be encouraging it and not cutting it.
And so have you dug into the numbers? Because our listeners have been hearing for more than a week now very different numbers depending on who you ask. The government says about $64 million comes in economic benefit for this province from this tax credit that costs the government $24 million. You're saying $150 million, which is what the film industry is saying. And so there is some discussion about whether this is because some people are accounting for direct benefit versus the spillover benefits to hotels and caterers and other things. So I'm wondering, what is your take on the numbers? Give me a bit more detail on how you see it.
Well, in my travels across the province, particularly since the budget came in, I have met with people who are carpenters, they're tradespeople, they're electricians, they're makeup artists, they're hoteliers, they're taxi companies. They all tell me about the work that they do for our creative industries. So there are all kinds of numbers to throw around, but to me it's the human effect of what's happening that we really have to take into account. And the fact is that we can't cut ourselves to greatness. Yes, we all have to do our bit to have a balanced budget. I completely agree with that. But no one ever looks at the benefit side, at the growth side, at the opportunity side, and that's actually the most exciting opportunity for Nova Scotia. It's a beautiful province. It has great scenery. It's a wonderful place for the film and TV industry to grow. We have to find ways to encourage it, but to lay at the feet of our youngest, most creative citizens all of the burden of our financial challenges, which is what the Liberals are doing, to me that is not the way to go if you really want to build a sustainable province.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because balancing the budget has been something that you've talked about a lot. The Liberals came to power promising voters that they would balance the budget. Yeah. They got a majority, so they say they're delivering on that mandate. Yeah. And they say that if they didn't cut this tax credit the way they have, making it from costing the government $24 million to $6 million for the tax credit, that their cuts would come in healthcare, in education, and that just isn't worth it for Nova Scotians. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's a very false argument to make to Nova Scotians, that we have to cut our growing industries in order to pay for healthcare and education. It is the people that work in our creative industries and our film industries. It's the people that work in the support industries around it. It's the people that are trying to build a modern and dynamic economy here in Nova Scotia that actually pay the taxes that go into healthcare and education. No one ever looks at how we can actually create jobs and grow the economy in order to get to that balanced budget, and this industry is a great example of how we can do that cleanly and efficiently in the future.
But so then square this circle for me, because if Premier McNeil is watching right now, he's asking you, where do we cut? Where would you, because you're also saying the government isn't moving fast enough in balancing the budget. And so where would you specifically make those cuts in order to pay for things like this film tax credit?
Well, look, it's a $10 billion budget, and the cost of administration continues to rise while young creative jobs are cut. To me, it should be the other way around. Only after the government has done everything it can to make its own operations more efficient, to cut the waste and duplication that we all know is still there, should they ever turn to Nova Scotians either for more in taxes or to our young Nova Scotians and say we can't continue to support their jobs. And that's not happening. The cost of government in this province goes up and up and up, and when times are tough, we turn to young people, we turn to our most vulnerable, or we turn to rural Nova Scotia and say they have to take cuts. Well, I think it's time that we flip that around. Yes, we have to balance the budget, but balance the budget by cutting the cost of government, starting at the top, starting in administration, and protecting the programs that we know, like this one, actually return a greater value to our province than they cost.
Okay, and lastly, you have said that some changes could be made to this tax credit. How would you like to see those changes roll out? Are you thinking more time? Are you thinking a different way of making changes? Tell us what you envision then for this tax credit.
Yeah, no one should say that things have to stay the way they are. We do need to change, and the tax credit is an example of something that can be changed and improved. What went so horribly wrong here is the government looked only at the cost side, did not discuss with the industry itself what changes could be made that would protect those jobs. So I am calling on them to slow down, to extend the deadline that they've put, which is only a few months away, for making their changes, and to work with industry on something that's fair. Absolutely. Young Nova Scotians are prepared to do their part to help balance the budget, and the people in the film industry have said that. So there is room to come up with a solution that's fair to the taxpayers of the province, but also allows for a growing industry to create more jobs here in Nova Scotia, and we have to get to that place.
Okay, Jamie Baillie, leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Nova Scotia, thank you very much for joining us. And we did ask for an interview with Finance Minister Diana Whelan or another Liberal MLA. Nobody was made available for us this morning, but we will, of course, bring you anything that they tell us. Crystal?
Thank you very much for this, Marieke. That is Global's Marieke Walsh reporting live from the legislature this morning.